The imposition of tariffs by the United States under the administration of President Donald Trump has been a significant development. It is fundamentally altering global trade dynamics. US President Trump announced that reciprocal tariffs will be imposed on countries like India, China, and Canada, and in fact on every trading partner of America starting from the 2nd of April. This move is part of a broader strategy to address what Trump perceives as unfair trade practices by partners who he says are ripping America off. In this context, it is worth exploring the implications of these reciprocal tariffs for India. What are the major export items from India to America which will get hit? And what impact will reciprocal tariffs have on both countries and their trade dynamics?
If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%.
There is a great degree of US-India trade interdependence, more than $90 billion of bilateral trade in 24-25, which hems both countries in together. Yet it is in trade that Trump is most unhappy. When it comes to big trading partners like India, Trump is seeking the most amount of concessions. He has a problem with the United States running up huge trade deficits with countries like India and wants to correct that. When Prime Minister Modi visited the White House last month, he pledged an ambitious aim to amp up bilateral trade between Washington and Delhi by the end of the decade. By 2030, both countries are hoping to increase their level of trade to $500 billion. But it is hard to convince Mr. Trump.
आज हमने द्विपक्षीय व्यापार को 2030 तक 2 गुना से भी अधिक बढ़ाकर $500 बिलियन तक पहुंचाने का लक्ष्य निर्धारित किया है। हमारी टीमें एक पारस्परिक लाभकारी ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट को शीघ्र संपन्न करने पर काम करेगी।
Both sides have also pledged to finalize a bilateral trade deal before the end of the year. Trump has to visit India by the fall for the annual Quad summit, but finalizing a trade agreement in 6 months' time is easier said than done. Trade negotiations are inherently complicated and they take years to finalize. The United States could target some of these high-value Indian exports if they're not able to get a bilateral trade arrangement by the end of the year. Pharmaceuticals and refined petroleum products face the highest risk because of established US domestic production capabilities. And this is without even going into software exports, which are a huge item of export from India to the United States. India, in fact, exports close to $200 billion of software products and services to America every year. But merchandise trade, and this is what Trump's pet peeve is, this is his main target. India-US merchandise trade reached $120 billion in the financial year 23-24. Exports from India to the United States grew more than 6% to over $60 billion. The top exports, in fact, the highest category of products from India to the US are refined petroleum products. India has consistently reduced its dependence on cheap Russian crude oil, which it had procured in a massive way since the Ukraine war began. Right now, Russian oil accounts for less than a quarter of India's oil purchases monthly, and it will now progressively come down further under Trump 2.0.
The Prime Minister and I also reached an important agreement on energy that will restore the United States as a leading supplier of oil and gas to India. It will be hopefully their #1 supplier, and the groundbreaking development for U.S. nuclear industry. India is also reforming its laws to welcome U.S. nuclear technology, which is at the highest level, into the Indian market.
There's also generic pharmaceutical drugs that are used in the pharma industry to the tune of $7.5 billion every year. Trump's new health czar, his health secretary, RFK Jr., is not a big fan of big pharma companies. Indian exports of generics could be another pressure point in the trade relationship. All in all, the United States remains India's largest export destination, absorbing about 20% of all of India's total outbound shipments. India has been a target of Trump's criticism for its high tariffs, particularly in sectors like automobiles, where he says Indian tariffs exceed 100%, which means it's double the cost of selling a car in India as opposed to that same car being sold in the United States. Now, these reciprocal tariffs, which he's threatening from the 2nd of April, mean that whatever tariffs India imposes on American goods, the US will impose similar tariffs on Indian goods that are going into the US. This could significantly affect India's exports to America, which include pearls, precious stones, metals, and coins. These are among India's top exports to the United States. They are valued at over $10 billion. This is also a highly labor-intensive industry, and therefore, if there are reciprocal tariffs, it could have down-the-line impact on mass labor as well. Electrical and electronic equipments, another major export category, is valued at nearly $10 billion. Right now, India produces about 10% plus of all iPhones that are assembled around the world, and the hope is to take it up to 25% by the end of the decade. If reciprocal tariffs come in, this could be a big pain point from Trump's point of view. Pharmaceutical products, like I mentioned earlier, valued about $7.5 billion. These are generic compounds that are meant to produce cheap generic drugs by big American pharma companies. Again, could be a pain point. And then, of course, there is mineral fuels, oils, and distillation products. India refines petroleum products worth over $6.5 billion that are exported to the United States. Trump now wants India to buy more American crude, which is both more expensive and harder to refine. The tariffs on Indian exports currently, India faces varying tariffs in the United States, but with reciprocal tariffs, these could increase significantly. For instance, if India imposes a 100% tariff on US automobiles that come into the Indian market, then America could impose a similar tariff on Indian automobiles that are exported, and also auto spare parts that are a big commodity of export into the United States. So Indian auto manufacturers like Tata Motors, through Jaguar Land Rover, and of course Mahindra & Mahindra export vehicles to the US. These companies could face increased tariffs on their exports, particularly affecting their profitability and competitiveness when it comes to the American market. In the financial year 23-24, Tata Motors exported more than 20,000 units abroad, a bulk of them going to America. Mahindra & Mahindra exports around 3,000 units every year. On the other way around, Trump has had a pet peeve about high Indian import duty on American products. He made a huge deal publicly in his first term regarding Harley-Davidson motorcycles. India preemptively addressed Trump's long-standing concern on this motorcycle tariff in the Union Budget 2025. So, for motorcycles under 1600cc, the duty has been cut from 50% to 40%. This follows a 2019 duty cut in Trump's first term, when Harley-Davidson motorcycles were tariffed at 100%, that was brought down to 50% after Trump's complaints. The latest reduction down to 40% makes Harley's India-made bikes about 12 to 18% cheaper, and potentially the company is hoping to double its annual sales to at least 5,000 units. India also recently reduced duties on several items, including bourbon whiskey, from 150% to under 100%. This move is seen as a gesture to improve trade relations with the United States. Bourbon whiskey is a significant American export item. There's electric cars and lithium-ion batteries, which are meant for electric cars, reducing duties on these items, particularly EVs, from 110% to 15% if electric cars are manufactured in India. That is meant to lure electric car giant Tesla to invest in India. When Prime Minister Modi was in Washington recently, he met with Tesla and DOGE boss Elon Musk, who committed to open the first Tesla showrooms in Mumbai and Delhi later this year. So these reductions could help American companies by making their products more competitive in the Indian market. However, with reciprocal tariffs looming from the 2nd of April and a fall deadline for a bilateral trade agreement looking like something that is going to be a monumental ask of negotiators from both sides, the benefits might be short-lived unless that trade deal is arrived at quickly. It is literally a race against time for both India and America.